Um, I'll just start by introducing our panelists, and I'll paste the questions in the chat so that you guys can see them. So our panelists today are Alexis Ortega and Jenny Hernandez. I don't know if you guys were comfortable turning on your cameras. You don't have to, but whatever. Oh, is it on? Wait, can we? Huh? Oh, sorry. My screen just changed. Yeah, so I'll do that and I'll post the questions in the chat for you guys, but we really appreciate you guys coming to help lead our discussion and answer these questions that the class of 2020 sent in. So I'm gonna paste the first question in the chat, and then if you guys just wanna jump back and forth with answers or whatever you're thinking. There's the first one. So the first one is, what would you recommend not to do in terms of virtual learning? Like where did you make any mistakes throughout virtual learning in college so far?
I guess I could start off. I think what I wouldn't recommend is like going through it thinking it's going to be the same as in person, or it's going to be the same sort of vibe of like being productive mainly. I know once you get home or once you're working from home, I feel like it's a totally different vibe than like being at school, at the library, or anything of that sort. So I would recommend, sorry, I wrote down some notes. Okay. I wouldn't recommend not going to lectures. Like even if they're just, even if you feel like it's like a hassle, like even if it's just in the background, I feel like just listening in can help a lot, because you may never know when, like if you're going back through, you just have like some minute like a small little detail that you just remember just from like listening into the background. So I would not recommend skipping lectures. And one mistake that I did was, to be completely honest, I may have skipped a couple lectures here and there, and that was not good because one of the quizzes I took was exactly on one of the lectures I skipped. So don't try to make those mistakes.
Also, sorry, I forgot to introduce Ruby's brother. Andrew's going to be here also on the panel. So thank you, Andrew, for being here. And thank you, Alexis, for sharing that. Did Jenny or Andrew want to share a little bit next about that question?
Yeah, I can share next. Yeah, I agree with Alexis with like staying on top of the classes and that kind of thing. And I think that, I'm not sure if other schools are doing this, but mine weren't actually live sessions. They were pre-recorded lectures. So that made it way easier for you to not show up or like not do it the day of, which meant you could totally, you know, been to the end of the class and then didn't watch any of the videos. So I think that showing up, even though you don't really have to show up, is a big thing. So just show up during the time that your schedule says to, even though you may not even be with a professor at that time. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically maintain a schedule. Some other thing that I think will come up later on in the semester is test and, you know, accounting for glitches and that kind of thing. Because I had one of my friends take a test and there was a glitch where she couldn't submit it. So the professor didn't allow her to submit it because they thought that she cheated or, you know, she took more time on the test. So just take account glitches and everything else and show up early. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And Andrew, Were you able to see the question that we pasted in the chat?
Yes, I did.
Did you want to say anything on that question, or should we move on to the next one?
I think I'll pitch in a thought for the next question.
Okay. Okay, so here's our next question. The next question from class of 2020 was, what should I expect from college online? Are there any specific and important changes I should be aware of?
I guess I could go first again. I guess to continue off from my point before is that the thing that you should most be expecting, in my opinion, is the lack of productivity. I feel like, or at least the lack of motivation in that regard. Because it's very much a different online. Doing classes online very much feels different than in person. It's very easy to get distracted. It's surprisingly easy to get distracted. And you kind of are just there on your computer a lot. Like if you have like, let's say three to five classes a week, that meets like, let's say 3 times a week, that's going to be like what, like 15 hours at the very least, roughly. Like just sitting in front of your computer, either rewatching like lectures because they're pre-recorded or being in them live. And once there's like, it's really hard to have that change in mindset between I'm in class and like I should be productive versus like the minute like that lecture's over, or the minute you stop watching that lecture or whatever, I have a very hard time like my brain being like, okay, I should be working. And instead I'm just like, okay, I finished watching that. Time to go like goof off for like an hour. It's very, I would just say like be expected to not necessarily be motivated, not necessarily be productive, but I would also not take it too hard and be too hard on yourself, because from my experience is like if you start like stressing about like oh shoot, like I haven't been productive, it's just gonna make it worse. And I would say like specific and important changes, no, that would be probably my biggest like important change.
To add to that, I think that one of the things that I encountered was studying, and when you go to class, sometimes you're taking notes on your laptop, and that was there was a change. So what I did is I instead did note paper. I got a notebook and started taking notes that way. So it held me accountable as to I had my Zoom open on my computer and I could still be taking notes, because I found it really hard to be on Zoom and then taking notes on my computer, because like Alexis said, you get distracted very easily and then somehow you end up on like YouTube or Google or something. So I think if it's paper and pencil and you're just taking notes that way, it's way easier to stay focused.
I feel like you also have to remember that not to be stay involved in other things outside of your schoolwork, because you have to remember to put your schoolwork ahead of everything else. Because I know I'm wanting to do other things like around the house or things like that, and totally forget, oh man, my assignment. So be cautious of that, I would say, for sure.
One other slight comment. Another thing to be prepared for is the move, not just like what Jenny was saying, like you can't it's very hard to like take notes or even like do your homework, and then you have to be prepared to like scan everything. So I was gonna quickly add that like it'd be very beneficial if like before a quiz or things of that sort, like before I submit a assignment, is like get used to the whole Canvas, like just like scanning your homework and submitting it through Canvas or things of that sort, like using Genius Scan, or I think even Google has your own scanning system. Like scanning things through your phones is 10 times like faster than if you have a printer or a scanner, like scanning it that way. So I would say like I would like expect that transition to like being more tech savvy in that regard.
Or also, I've been looking to invest in a monitor just so I have enough, room within my screen. So that's also something that you guys could do, just to be able to take notes online.
I second that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. We can move on. All right, so the next question was, how can I better connect with people virtually, aka other students and professors? Oh, sorry.
I could go ahead with this one. I think this is a really hard question just because, I mean, we don't really have experience in this way either. I think our experience is a little bit different because, we had friends going into it already. We had like classmates we could talk to. And I think that for people, going in right now, you're starting new and everyone is. But I think that professors will somehow make it easier by doing like mini breakout rooms. So that way you're, with 3 other or 4 other people in like a Zoom session. And in that way, I think what you could do is take advantage of that and, lead the conversation and try to build connections with those people, and just by getting their phone numbers or things like that. As for professors, I think one of the things that I'm trying to do next semester is showing up early to my Zoom calls, just so I have that like, oh, hi, like the awkward hi at the beginning. I know it's really awkward, but that way it'll get the professor to get to know you.
I completely agree with that too. I know with my professors, like even like if you make the effort of showing up early each time, like professors will take notice and like talk to you more. And even like through the whole virtual thing, my current I'm doing research on a professor that actually wasn't at the school before I asked to do research with him. So don't be afraid to just shoot the professor an email and see if you guys can like work something out and set up a meeting to just talk with them either about schoolwork or some type of virtual research you want to do, things of that sort. Student wise, like Jenny said, it's very hard and it's easy for us to say like, oh yeah, like just keep going at it with your friends because we've already met them in person. But from what I've heard, that like, yeah, just have fun in those breakout rooms. They're not when the teacher records, from my understanding is that they can't see what's going on in the breakout rooms. So just like if you can, if the people, if you're vibing with the people, like have a little bit of fun and exchange phone numbers. See if you guys can like do something virtually.
Yeah, I don't know what else to add. Basically, both Alexis and Jenny added to or stated off of it pretty much, where it's like just make great communication. Don't let there be like a dead silence moment,
Cool, thank you. The next question was, what are some ways you stayed motivated learning from home rather than the classroom?
I guess I could go first. One thing that I found really helpful is to allocate a certain amount of time in the day, either like 2 hour, like roughly like 2 hour blocks or things that sort, and then like take 30 minutes breaks, or like just like allocate blocks where you're gonna try to be productive. And one thing that I found actually pretty useful for, at least for my brain, was like have work clothes in that regard, because then you'll get like, if you have like clothes that you wear for like being productive, I feel like it keeps my brain being like, okay, this is a productive moment versus like if I try doing work in my pajamas, I tend to just be like, let me go back to bed or like work from bed. And I felt like it was pretty helpful to have like work clothes and set hours where I would be productive.
I totally agree with that. I think maintaining a schedule is really important, and I think I struggled with it last semester. But there's this app, or there's like a Google extension called Strict Workflow, and it's basically like you set a timer, and for like let's say 20 minutes, it doesn't let you go on YouTube, Facebook, or any of those social medias. And then after that time is up that you set, it gives you like 5 minutes of a break time where you could actually go onto those websites, and it restarts over and over again, so that way you're actually productive.
For me personally, like me kind of staying focused easier was knowing when to kind of start working. So I usually work better at night, so I ended up doing a lot of my homework at night when usually everyone's going to bed, and so I mostly stay focused like that.
All right, so the next question was, where are the best places to study? What would you recommend to students without access to a quiet study/class environment at home?
I would say as far away from your bed as possible, just because, if you see, like mine's right behind me and I'm like, I want to go there. So I think even if it's outside, the living room, anywhere, but I think if you're doing that and, if you're living in a noisy household, then you could invest in some noise canceling headphones. So that way you could be listening to your lectures or music and without distractions in that way. As for like if your family's walking around, maybe try to look towards a wall so that way you don't see them passing back and forth. And make yourself comfortable, and even with like a blanket or like a pillow.
I would agree with that. Stay away from your bed. Working from bed is not fun because you don't work. But I guess I would recommend the same thing, like noise canceling headphones or even like just earplugs that like cancel out noise. And yeah.
I would say for me personally, I think Ruby can attest to this, where it's like there's a lot of people in my household too. Like the best place to study was outside. Just I got a table and chair. That's where I did all my studying. And at times, I'm going to be honest, I did do homework in bed, but it was a lot harder to like stay productive when I was doing that.
All right, so our seventh question is, or sixth, was what advice do you have for balancing school, work, and personal time?
I personally feel like this is a big question on like yourself and like knowing your productivity hours. Because I know I would consider myself a morning person, so I feel like I'm most productive between like 9 to like 1, and after that I slowly start like messing around and things of that sort. So I feel like knowing what times are your productive times is a really good way to like schedule out when to do work. And if you're up to it, like try to knock out, always have time for yourself, honestly, also at the end of the day, especially since it's during a pandemic and everything's online and you're staring at a screen all the time. Have time for yourself and try not to stress yourself out too much.
I'm trying to do is actually
I think Jenny might be frozen.
Yeah.
No, we cannot. Oh wait, you're moving now. Okay.
is this good now?
Yeah, I think so. Just kidding. Oh no. Andrew, while we wait for Jenny to reconnect, do you want to share a little bit about this question?
I mean, even before the quarantine stuff, I had a hard time doing this, honestly, because my major is specifically more product based, and so kind of what I was doing, in a sense, is fun to me, and so doing all these things is, you know, it was a hard balance, but there definitely is a balance for everyone, and so just kind of finding that balance is a tricky one. And I think the way to do it is kind of know what you like and kind of ration it out. So obviously not being like on YouTube 7 hours out of the day, but like, or like other things, doesn't necessarily have to be YouTube, but is basically what I'm saying is just like ration out the things that you like to do.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that I agree with Alexis and Andrew in the way that you could set time apart for doing all these sorts of things. And what I'm trying to do is set time apart, like in the mornings, do class and homework, and then in the middle of the day, have like a break where I could eat and, watch Netflix or something. So just having a schedule and trying to follow it. And I know that it's not always, it won't always work out because you're living at home and there's stuff that goes on, but trying to keep that balance is really hard. But I think just knowing yourself, like Alexis was saying, and understanding at what time you work best, because I'm more of a night person, so it would make sense for me to do homework at night than in the morning.
One other thing I might add is if like you're at home and like if you're with a lot of people, especially like if you help out with chores a lot with your family or even like little brothers and stuff like that, is one thing I've heard that sort of works is try to explain to your family members, like it's like I was reading this and I kind of tried it. It worked out pretty well. It's like on duty hours versus like off duty hours, if that makes sense. Like try to designate hours where like you tell them like, oh, like from this time I'm gonna try to like be productive, like please try not to bother me unless it's like an emergency, and like these hours like I'm still gonna be trying to be productive, but if you like need something, I'll try to work around and like help you out. Like that might be very beneficial because I feel like by offering that as a solution, if you have a very like busy home life, might work in your advantage and make them feel more empathetic, I guess, to your plight of online school.
That was awesome feedback. Thank you guys. So our next question, oh, I'm just kidding. That was all of our questions from our class of 2020. But we do have people from other classes here. So we're going to open it up for any other questions regarding virtual learning in college or just college. And if there are no questions, then any last pieces of advice that you guys had that you guys didn't get to already address through the questions, you guys can go ahead and give that. So if there were any questions, you guys can like put it in the chat.
Alexis, how do you handle not being able to play Exploding Kittens with all your college friends?
I feel like this question is slightly off topic, but there are online emulators.
Thank you.
I could also make another last comment, I guess, about like the whole experience in general. If you're, since you guys are freshmen going into your freshman year, like a lot of these classes in the grand scheme of things don't really matter if you're going to go to graduate school or even a career in that aspect. So I would say, honestly, try taking it easily. Like if you can push a class back and lessen your workload, try doing that. Like, don't overload your schedule right now. Trust me, it's not worth it. I've had friends who took 5 classes this previous semester and they absolutely hated the online experience. I took 1 less class just because it fit in my schedule and I tried to. I didn't like do it because of the pandemic. That was before we even really knew it was a thing. But I had a better time in that regard. And I had a friend who only was taking like 3 classes and a half because that class was like half of a class, and they had a better time with it. Like if you really can, try to push back like a gen ed to another year, or like talk with your advisor, see if there's something you can do to lessen your workload, because it's really hard to stay motivated, especially during a pandemic, and it's really hard to do things online. And try taking it easy and put your mental health above all else, honestly.
And to answer, I don't know who Bautista is, Bautista, but to answer that comment that they wrote in the chat.
I would say for that question, see if you can work out with your professor if they could record the lectures, and if it's okay if you can just watch them offline rather than being in person.
To answer Marlene's question of what was something you liked about online learning, I think that I connected with my classmates more on Zoom. And I think that just because everyone was bored. And so we were at home and we would finish like our team meeting, and after that we would just be talking for a while. So I think it was just more of a connection that I think I was missing on campus.
For me personally, it was like I'm a really slow learner, so like I'd set my own pace when it came to some classes, not all classes. Some teachers are mean and still work at the same fast pace, and so for some classes I had the best experience because of that. I set my own pace.
I would say some of the lectures, if they're pre-recorded, you can watch them at 2 times speed, especially if the professor in question is very old and talks very slowly. That was something I liked.
You could also look through the transcripts of those videos if you don't want to watch them. That's something else.
Okay, I can't see the chat, but that was all. Those were all the questions. Yeah. Yeah.
I believe so.
Cool. So we're like super early. Did you guys, besides like virtual learning advice, I know you guys did share a little bit with, but were there any like last pieces that you wanted to share? Just in regards to college in general, even if it was advice that's irrelevant to virtual learning.
If you're really looking to do research or network, honestly, try bugging professors to talk to you. A lot of professors will love talking about the stuff that they do. So just asking them to talk to you will most likely get you a meeting with them. And if you can like keep that up, you'll be able to develop like a relationship with them and then like learn more about that. So I'd say that's a good point. And also don't feel like don't feel like what's the word? Don't feel discouraged if a professor doesn't get back to you right away from an email. Because a lot of times they're also very busy. I mean, it's a pandemic, so we have to be understanding both ways and bug them, I guess, a lot. You just gotta be persistent, I would say.
My piece of advice would be to show up. That's literally it. I think that last semester, professors were a little more lenient where attendance wasn't required once we went online, and that was because a lot of people lived in different time zones, and it was just difficult for a lot of people. So they just pre-recorded, and they had live sessions or office hours. So I would say show up to those, and sometimes they give little hints for tests and that kind of thing. So, and then on these live sessions, usually only like 10 people show up. So you get to connect with the professor in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to.
Kind of heading back to the virtual learning, I don't know if anyone stated this, but I feel like you have to be consistent with staying organized, or probably even more organized than usual, because you have no one repeating to you, like, hey man, quiz Friday, or things like that. Like, be more organized, things like that. So that's one tip I would totally say.
Cool. I have a question about that though. Just for all of you, like, how do you guys stay organized? Do you feel like it's more helpful? I know, especially in high school, they were always bugging us to keep like especially Mr. Polizzi, like a planner, like a tangible planner. But what do you guys feel like is really working best for you, especially during the pandemic? Like creating tasks on Google Calendar, or do you guys still write everything down? How do you guys go about that?
I personally have my physical planner where I just write everything down. And I think it's just because I get satisfied when I finish with something and I just cross it out, actually cross it off. So I like that, but you could also do it online. But if you're interested in more of the paper planners, I would suggest there's this one called Passion Planner where it's like not just an academic, but you could do like little doodles and like your goals for the week. And I think especially now, I think it's not just about our academic life, it's also about how we're feeling. So I think it would be a good investment in that way.
I know I was never good with like a physical planner. I'd always end up losing it personally. But I do agree with writing things down is beneficial. So what I usually do is sticky note things onto like my laptop. And since I'm going to be using my laptop throughout the whole pandemic to do literally everything, it's always there to look at. And I do agree that's very satisfying, crossing things out once you're done with them. And that helps a lot. And since everything is online, my general experience is professors tend to post a lot of like their plans and what's going to be due on Canvas. And even Canvas has a calendar accessory. And from my experience, at least so far, is that most professors put like the important things on those calendars. So you can always, like, if you feel like you didn't like write something down then and there, look through the calendar and see if there's anything that you missed.
I mean, something I would say, kind of going along that out, is like, I didn't do this, but I've seen it, where it's like Nicholas Holmes, like my quarter line. I would notice that he would do like some bougie like writing, like with whatever his notes were, and like he was able to like capture, in a sense, like what needs to be due this day and that day. And so I think maybe like a whiteboard would be a good investment sometimes, because that's also what he did.
Cool. And then another question. And you guys talked a little bit about like having breakout rooms, and Jenny, you talked a little bit about like how you felt like you connected better with people virtually because everybody was bored and just like wanted to talk or whatever. But when it comes to like having study groups, have you guys had experience with that, virtually doing study groups? And what are some ways you found were most effective in that kind of setting? Because I know for me, usually I was like, when we were in person, I was doing like flashcards with my friends at the library, but it's a little bit different online, I guess, doing that through a screen. So do you guys have any experience with that?
I think that when I studied with people, it wasn't necessarily people that I had classes with. So it was more of like we just, sat in a place together and try to hold each other accountable. And I think that's still doable over Zoom. There's like this way that you could connect us so both of you guys are listening to the same music. So if you guys have the same music taste, you could be listening to music and doing your own thing as you're, studying. So that was something that is worth trying.
I know personally it was really hard to work schedules because a lot of like the people in my class are all East Coast or like East Coast, so there's always a 3-hour time difference. So it was really hard to work a schedule with that study group. But one thing that we would end up doing is like writing our own sort of questions and sending it to each other through like email, and then we'd like answer each other's questions, like basically like practice questions more than anything. Like we would write practice questions to each other, send them, and then like we would all like do them, and we'd like compare answers in the end. And since like we created them, it was a really like nice way to see how like what other people's thought process was. And I would say like that's a pretty decent way of doing things. Oh, also maybe having like a group chat of like you and whoever's in your class in it. So that way you can always just shoot a message or like talk to each other on there, and like you can answer it in your own time or things of that sort. So there's like no time sensitive like sort of like pressure. Unless it's like right before the homework is due. But yeah.
Yeah, I think text is usually how I'm just remembering how I was sitting for my finals, and usually it was text. Like I would text someone a question, and if it's right before a final or a test, usually they answer because they're also doing the same thing. But yeah, I agree with Alexis in having, there's people not just that are like 3-hour differences, but depends on what college or university you go to. But sometimes I had people that, were in India, so it was totally complete opposite of the time difference or time here. So it was just having that patience or asking people literally probably a day before, because they would get back to you the day of or the day after.
All Awesome. And then Andrew, did you have anything to add to that or mostly agree?
It was mostly agree because my major is more project based, so there really isn't much of an opportunity to do things like that, you know.
For sure. So I think I have another question, I guess. I know for me, I was always having a hard time like finding books really cheap, and at the end of the presentation we're going to show like links to different resources, and one of them is like different websites that you can get textbooks on. But I know that some people also like there's websites to rent books, and I know that there's so many different websites to find like free textbooks out there. So what would you guys recommend for that? Do you guys have any specific websites that you usually use to find textbooks, or do you guys rent, or do you buy? What do you think are some good options for people?
I would say I have a personal preference for like physical. Like I have a hard time of like staring at like a screen or first I would talk with your classmates and see if there's a PDF or anything like that, because then if you can get that free, that'd be 100% better. And most of the time, like talking with other college students, someone has a PDF that they can share with you. But other than that, personally, I would always just like rent, like if I can, and just like have that physically on hand. A specific website, I don't really have one. I usually just rent it from Amazon.
Yeah, I like physical books, so I mostly rent or just buy them used. But there's this website, I think it's like Gen Library or something. I'm trying to look it up, but that's the one I use when I need a PDF version.
Sorry, Andrew, could you repeat that? It was kind of cutting out.
Personally, I just rent off of the bookstore on my campus.
All right, cool. Those are all the questions I had. Oh, there's something in the chat.
I also put the link. I think it's that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I'll add that later to the end of the presentation so that we can share with everybody too, people who weren't able to make it also. Yeah, we really appreciate you guys coming to share with us.
Nicholas had a question. I think he did it privately to me, but I'll answer it. He said, what do you do with textbooks once you don't need them? And he said, if you just sell them or keep them. So I think it just depends. Like for my general education class, the books I got, I usually rented them, so I wouldn't have to, go through the hassle of selling it back. But if you do buy it, the bookstore usually takes them back, but they give you like, 50% of the value. Or you could also sell them through like the Facebook groups that usually universities have to sell textbooks. And if you really like the class or it's the subject that you're studying, I usually keep mine just because I could go back and refresh at times. But that's usually just for your, major classes.
I agree with Jenny. Personally, my sketching and product stuff, I keep, but like other classes where it's like math, I sold those books and things like that because no one likes math.
Yeah, and also sometimes it can be a bit harder with some classes because you have to get access codes for like homework, and those books are definitely going to be harder to sell. So in that case, I usually end up keeping it unless I find someone that literally just wants the textbook without the access code, which is hard to do.
Cool. Were there any more questions? Maybe that were messaged privately that I can't see. No? Okay. All right. We really appreciate you guys coming out. It means a lot, and I know that it's been a really difficult time for everyone to navigate. So it's really helpful when we have older alumni who are really close in age to us to kind of share what's working for them, what didn't work for them, especially for the class of 2020. I know that that means a lot to them. So we really, really, really appreciate it. Lastly, I think I had a slide. Yeah, so this was some resources that we gathered, just a schedule maker. And then Jenny kind of talked about earlier, using like, I don't know what you call like an application to block certain websites so you can concentrate while you're trying to focus on school. And then here was, this is a link to a bunch of different links of like textbook websites. And then this was some more tips on online classes, but I read through it and a lot of the tips that we got here today were better. So you can look at that if you want. And then, yeah, this was about free Wi-Fi for students during COVID. So if you don't have access to Wi-Fi at home or unreliable, oh, my email. How do I? Okay, I'm going to. Can you guys see my email? No? Okay, it's like popped up right. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Sharing is paused. Okay, stop sharing. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, yeah, so that was that. I'll send the link to everybody right now to that presentation. But yeah, if you guys wanted to like stay, because we finished really early, and then just catch up with each other, that's totally welcome. Or you guys are definitely free to go if you'd like to. So, to you guys.
See y'all.